On a bright Tuesday morning in June 2021, Cian McLachlan, a charismatic young Irishman, set out for what seemed like a routine solo hike in the vast wilderness of Grand Teton National Park. Known for his infectious energy and love of adventure, Cian had made Jackson, Wyoming his home for 2 years, working as a snowboard instructor in winter and a bartender in summer. But that day, his hike into the rugged terrain would soon turn into an unsolved mystery that would grip the nation. Despite the most extensive search efforts, involving helicopters, rescue dogs, and countless man-hours, Cian vanished without a trace. Thank you for choosing my video among thousands of videos out there to watch. Helping me with a subscription of yours is very small but very big and too valuable. The only clues were a fleeting digital ping from his phone, a few details about his destination, and the lingering question, how could someone so familiar with the area simply disappear? What started as a peaceful trek into the wild quickly turned into a haunting enigma, with no answers in sight, leaving Cian's family, search teams, and even seasoned experts asking, how is this possible? On June 8, 2021, Cian McLachlan, a 23-year-old Irishman with a love for the mountains, disappeared while hiking in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming. What began as a peaceful solo hike quickly spiraled into one of the most baffling mysteries of the American wilderness. Cian was no ordinary tourist passing through the area. He had made Jackson his home for the past 2 years, drawn by the mountains and the adventure they promised. With shoulder-length brown hair and a broad, athletic build, he lived the dream that so many young adventurers aspire to, working as a snowboard instructor in winter and a bartender in summer, all while surrounded by the awe-inspiring beauty of the Teton. His infectious personality made him a local legend, and his friends and colleagues often spoke of him with deep affection, recalling his magnetic energy that drew people to him effortlessly. Cian's mother, Grain, living in Ireland, had a particularly close bond with him, always cherishing their frequent video calls despite the distance that separated them. On the morning of June 8th, Cian sent his usual texts to friends, warm, funny, and full of the lively spirit that everyone who knew him had come to love. In his communication with his mother, there was nothing out of the ordinary. It was just another ordinary day for Cian, or so it seemed. Cian wasn't a novice hiker. He had spent considerable time in the mountains and was well acquainted with the rugged terrain of Wyoming. Yet, on that fateful day, he ventured into Grand Teton National Park with minimal gear, just a bottle of water, a t-shirt, short shorts, and a bucket hat, leaving behind any necessary emergency supplies. At 2:15 p.m., security cameras at the Moose entrance station captured Cian's vehicle entering the park, his signature red Apple Watch on his wrist, and his distinctive look easily recognizable. These details would soon become crucial to the investigation, but for the moment, no one knew what path Cian had set out on. He had been researching Delta Lake before his hike, an area known for its stunning beauty, but also for its challenging terrain. Delta Lake is a hidden gem in the Tetons, tucked away in a rugged part of the park that demands a certain respect from even experienced hikers. The trail leading to it, the Lupin Meadows Trailhead, is not for the faint of heart. The area around Delta Lake is known for its steep, rocky terrain, and while it attracts adventurers, it's a place where one wrong step could prove fatal. Despite this, Kian's decision to head in with minimal gear made no sense to those who knew the park. As the hours passed and Kian's absence became more pronounced, concern began to mount. He wasn't just any hiker. He was a local, someone with knowledge of the terrain. But still, the lack of preparation seemed illogical. As the sun began to set, the wilderness that Kian loved seemed to grow more ominous, and he disappeared into its depths. Kian's last confirmed signal came from his iPhone at approximately 3:30 p.m. on Teton Park Road. That was the last known trace of him, a digital echo that would become a key piece of evidence in a mystery that was just beginning to unfold. Kian McLachlan wasn't a typical tourist or a passing wanderer. He had roots in the Jackson community. At 6 feet tall with an athletic build, he had a presence that was impossible to ignore. His shoulder-length brown hair and distinctive Irish accent made him stand out, but it was his personality that truly left an impression on those around him. Kian had a magnetic charm, a warmth and humor that made him instantly likable. He was the kind of person who lit up a room, someone whose infectious energy drew people to him, whether they had known him for years or had just met. His best friend Max Newman would later describe him as a local legend, a person everyone loved and admired. Kian's adventurous spirit wasn't confined to his social life. It was at the heart of his decision to move to Wyoming in the first place. He had always dreamed of living in the American West, a place where the mountains called to him and where the sense of freedom and adventure was unlike anything he had experienced in Ireland. Originally from South Dublin, Kian had attended Newark Comprehensive before briefly studying at the Dublin Institute of Technology. But his heart was always set on something more. Something far from the classroom and the hustle of city life. He wanted the mountains. He wanted to explore. He wanted the wild places that many only dream of visiting. It was this passion for the outdoors that led him to Jackson, a small town in Wyoming that had long been a haven for outdoor enthusiasts. Here, he could chase the lifestyle he had always imagined, teaching people to snowboard in the winter and working as a bartender in the summer. Jackson, with its breathtaking landscapes and endless opportunities for adventure, became his home. He was part of a tight-knit community that understood the mountains, that respected the risks and rewards they offered. In many ways, Kian was living the dream that so many had when they first set foot in Wyoming, surrounded by nature, working in a field that aligned with his passions and making lasting connections with people who shared the same love for the outdoors. Yet despite his familiarity with the area, Kian ventured into the wild on June 8, 2021, in a way that seemed inexplicable to those who knew him. With minimal gear, no backpack, and no emergency supplies, he set off into the rugged terrain of Grand Teton National Park, heading toward Delta Lake, an area known for its difficulty and beauty. What led him to make such an uncharacteristic decision? Was it confidence in his own abilities, a sense of invincibility from his time in Wyoming, or something else that pushed him into the wild with such little preparation? The questions would continue to mount as search teams began their efforts to track him down. But for now, Kian's disappearance remained a chilling enigma, one that would haunt the Teton wilderness for years to come. At precisely 2:15 p.m. on June 8th, Kian McLachlan's vehicle was captured entering the Grand Teton National Park through the Moose entrance station. Security footage showed him wearing his signature white short-sleeve shirt, red Apple Watch, and sporting his distinctive bucket hat. These subtle details would later become essential in piecing together the mystery of his disappearance. He had entered the park alone, with minimal gear, just a single bottle of water, a white t-shirt, shorts, and his bucket hat, items more suited to a casual stroll than a serious trek through the unforgiving backcountry. Despite his 2 years of living in the area and his familiarity with the terrain, Kian set out into the park without a backpack, no emergency supplies, and no clear indication of his exact destination other than vague online searches that seemed to point him toward Delta Lake. His last confirmed trace came at 3:30 p.m. when his iPhone sent a signal along Teton Park Road. That digital ping was the final known contact with Kian. A cold, silent trace of a person who had been alive just an hour earlier. After that, there was nothing. Not a footprint, not a sign, not a shred of evidence to indicate where he had gone. In the vastness of the wilderness, Kian simply vanished. As the hours turned into a day, and Kian failed to show up for work at his bartender job, concern turned into full-blown panic. Known for his reliability and friendly nature, Kian's absence was completely out of character. His friends began to call and text him, but there was no response. As more time passed without word from him, his loved ones began to fear the worst. On Saturday night, June 12, after nearly 4 days without hearing from Kian, a missing person report was filed and the search was officially underway. What followed was one of the most exhaustive search efforts in the park's history, as park rangers, volunteers, and search teams scrambled to locate him. The operation quickly became an all-hands-on-deck effort. Over 60 park staff members, search dogs, and specialized rescue teams were deployed, with aerial reconnaissance from helicopters scanning the vast wilderness from above. The search targeted high-probability areas, focusing on the most likely locations Kian might have ventured, including Garnet Canyon, Surprise Lake, Amphitheater Lakes, and Delta Lake. These areas, known for their rugged and treacherous terrain, were searched thoroughly, both on foot and by air, as the teams fought against the clock, hoping to find a trace of the missing hiker. Days turned into weeks, and yet no sign of Kian emerged from the wilderness. The search became an all-consuming effort, a desperate attempt to uncover the truth behind his mysterious disappearance. Each day that passed, the chances of finding Kian alive grew slimmer, yet the searchers pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere amidst the mountains and forests, Kian was still out there, clinging to survival. As search teams scoured the Taggart Lake area, with renewed intensity, no trace of Kian was found. There were no footprints, no personal items, and no sign that he had ever been there. Investigators began to scrutinize Heather's account more closely, and with each new detail, the story began to unravel. Witnesses who knew Heather soon came forward, revealing a shocking truth. Heather Mikowski had fabricated the entire encounter. She had never seen Kian on the trail that day, nor had they exchanged any conversation. In fact, she had invented the entire scenario, including the details about his appearance, his destination, and his personal life. The realization that the search had been led astray by a completely false report sent shockwaves through the investigation. Heather's deception had wasted 532 precious hours of search time hours that could have been spent focusing on more viable leads. Instead, the rescue team had been diverted to Taggart Lake and Bradley Lake, combing areas where Kian was never likely to have been. This misdirection had far-reaching consequences. The loss of valuable time resources and manpower could have cost Kian his life. The financial toll was equally staggering, with the wasted search effort amounting to $17,600 in federal resources. But the real cost was much deeper. Heather's false lead had given Kian's family false hope, only to have it shattered when the truth came to light. The pain of knowing that the search efforts had been misled by a lie was devastating for Grain McLachlan. The anguish of a mother already facing the unthinkable was compounded by the knowledge that so many people had worked tirelessly on a lead that was entirely fabricated. Once the deception was revealed, Heather Mikowski faced severe legal consequences. She entered into a deferred prosecution agreement, which included a 5-year ban from Grand Teton National Park and an agreement to pay $17,600 in restitution to cover the costs of the wasted search operation. Her actions had not only derailed the search for Kian, but had also caused a great deal of emotional harm to those who had placed their trust in her account. While her deceitful actions were ultimately uncovered, the damage had already been done. The search continued, but now with an even greater sense of urgency and a sharp focus on finding Kian. Despite the immense setback caused by Heather Mikowski's fabrication, the search for Kian McLachlan pressed on with renewed determination. The revelation that valuable search time had been wasted on a false lead was a heavy blow, but it didn't stop the dedicated search teams or Kian's family from continuing the search for the missing hiker. After a brief detour to Taggart Lake and Bradley Lake, efforts were quickly redirected back to the areas where Kian was most likely to have been: Garnet Canyon Surprise, Lake Amphitheater Lakes, and Delta Lake. These rugged areas, where the terrain was steep and unforgiving, were now the primary focus, as it became clear that Kian had been heading toward these high-risk locations on the day of his disappearance. While the investigation into the false lead had consumed valuable time, the search teams knew they couldn't afford to dwell on the past. They had to keep moving forward. More specialized teams were deployed, including experienced mountaineers and search dogs trained to track scents in the backcountry. While helicopters flew over the rugged terrain, scanning for any sign of Kian. One thing was certain: time was running out, and the search couldn't afford to lose any more momentum. Kian's mother, Grain, devastated by the loss of her son and the painful deception, found herself still committed to finding him. She returned to Wyoming multiple times personally, participating in the search efforts. Walking the same trails Kian had planned to hike, Grain talked to other hikers and mountaineers, distributing updated missing person flyers in the hope that someone might have seen her son or stumbled upon his belongings. Her resilience and refusal to give up on her son became a driving force for the search teams. Despite the overwhelming pain of uncertainty, Grain's involvement in the search provided a sense of purpose to the ongoing efforts. Every day, the hope of finding Kian alive grew fainter, but her resolve never wavered. The search continued with tireless dedication as Kian's family and the rescue teams refused to let the vast wilderness claim his memory without answers. But as the weeks passed and no trace of him emerged, the possibility of a miracle seemed increasingly unlikely. As the search expanded into its second month, with no breakthrough, a range of theories began to emerge regarding Kian McLachlan's disappearance. The more investigators and search teams analyzed the circumstances, the more questions arose. What happened to him on that fateful day? Could he have fallen victim to the treacherous terrain? Was he disoriented, or could something more sinister have occurred? While no definitive answers could be found, several theories gained traction, each one offering a plausible explanation for his vanishing. The first and most widely accepted theory among search professionals was that Kian may have suffered a fatal accident while navigating the challenging terrain, Delta Lake and Garnet Canyon. The areas he seemed to be heading toward were notoriously difficult to traverse. The trail system was steep and rocky, and the terrain was unforgiving. A misstep could have resulted in a fall, or perhaps Kian lost his footing while crossing one of the many treacherous streams or waterfalls that littered the area. With minimal gear and no backpack or emergency supplies, Kian may have been left vulnerable to the elements, unable to call for help or properly defend himself from the harsh conditions of the Teton wilderness. The combination of rapid weather, changes, dangerous rock slides, and unpredictable terrain made even the most experienced hikers cautious. Kian, despite his time in Wyoming, may have underestimated the risk which led to his tragic accident. Another theory that was considered was that Kian had become disoriented, possibly due to altitude or dehydration. The effects of hiking at higher altitudes can be unpredictable, and it's easy to get lost in the dense, rugged wilderness of the Tetons. Some suggested that Kian could have wandered off the trail and found himself in unfamiliar territory where confusion and panic set in. Exhaustion, dehydration, and a lack of supplies might have exacerbated his disorientation, leading him to make decisions that ultimately caused his disappearance. The vastness of the wilderness and the fact that even experienced hikers have gone missing in similar conditions made this theory seem plausible. A less widely discussed but still considered theory was the possibility of a wildlife encounter. Grand Teton National Park is home to both black bears and grizzly bears, and while attacks are rare, they do occur. Some experts suggested that Kian may have encountered one of these dangerous animals, which could have led to his disappearance. If he had been attacked, his body might have been dragged to a remote area, making it nearly impossible for search teams to recover any trace of him. However, this theory remained less likely given the absence of any physical evidence pointing to such an encounter, and it was seen as more speculative than the others. Ultimately, the most widely accepted explanation was that Kian had fallen victim to a tragic accident in the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Teton. The lack of any concrete evidence or trace of Kian's whereabouts suggested that he had either fallen in an area too remote or dangerous for searchers to access, or that he had been lost and unable to find his way back to the trail. The terrain itself held many secrets, and despite the tireless efforts of search teams, Kian's fate remained a mystery, locked away somewhere in the mountains that had drawn him there in the first place. More than 3 years have passed since Kian McLachlan disappeared into the vast wilderness of Grand Teton National Park. But his case remains one of the most haunting and unsolved mysteries in the American wilderness. Despite exhaustive search efforts involving helicopters, search dogs, and specialized rescue teams, not a single trace of Kian has been found. In the rugged terrain, his belongings, his red Apple Watch iPhone sunglasses, and other personal items remain missing, casting a long shadow over the investigation. In the harsh, unforgiving environment of the Tetons, no evidence has emerged to provide clues as to what happened to him, leaving his family, friends, and investigators with nothing but questions. His disappearance, which once seemed like a tragic accident, now feels even more elusive as time continues to erode the hope of finding any answers. While theories about what could have happened to Kian, whether he fell, became disoriented, or encountered wildlife, continue to circulate, no concrete evidence has come to light to confirm any of these scenarios. The wilderness, as vast and unpredictable as it is, has kept its secrets well hidden, and Kian's fate remains an enigma. With each passing year, the mystery deepens, and the likelihood of finding him or his remains becomes slimmer. Yet the search for answers persists as park rangers and law enforcement continue to maintain tip lines and encourage backcountry users to remain vigilant, hoping for a breakthrough that could finally shed light on what happened to Kian that June afternoon. Though Kian's physical presence may have vanished from the mountains, he loved his legacy, endures alive in the memories of those who knew him and the spirit of adventure he left behind. His friends, family, and co-workers still recall his magnetic personality, infectious energy, and the deep connection he had with the world around him. To those who spent time with him, Kian was more than just a man living out a dream. In the American West, he was someone who truly understood the joy of life. Someone whose love of adventure and the outdoors inspired everyone he encountered. His disappearance has left an unfillable void in the hearts of those who knew him best. Kian's mother, Grain, who has shown extraordinary strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable grief, continues to advocate for answers. She has returned to Wyoming multiple times, walking the very trails her son had planned to hike, and reaching out to other hikers and mountaineers in hopes of finding some clue that might finally bring closure. Though the mystery of Kian's fate has remained unsolved, his memory is kept alive through the ongoing search and the enduring hope that one day the truth will come to light. For those who loved him, the search for answers is not just about solving a mystery. It's about honoring Kian's adventurous spirit and his love for the wild places that call to him. The mystery of Kian McLachlan's disappearance may never be fully solved, but his legacy of adventure, his unrelenting curiosity, and his passion for life will forever remain etched in the hearts of all who knew him. The search for Kian, both for answers and for closure, continues driven by the hope that someday the truth about his fate will finally be revealed. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Your support truly means the world to me. If this video brought you value or resonated with you in any way, feel free to leave a little comment or hit subscribe so we can keep sharing more moments together. See you in the next one.